Let's go on to truth principles. Okay? What's the summary of the truth principles? Well, truth principles envelop God's truth around each creation, principle and law. So remember, love, envelop God's love around each creation, principle and law. Truth, all that does, the only thing different is that it envelops truth, facts, around all of God's principles, creations and law. That's what the truth principle is, quite simply. It ensures that truth is inseparably joined with love, and in fact the two cannot function without each other. And as we'll learn, as I probably need to state, truth, many of you don't realise, is actually an emotional as well as a physical condition. And for many of you, you've not been seeing that, although you can feel the emotion in opposition to truth, can you not? And what's that? Fear, yeah. That insidious emotion that draws you away from being honest and truthful is fear. So if fear is the emotion that opposes truth, then don't you see that truth must also be an emotion? Must be, right? It has to be emotional in its content. So it's inseparably joined with love. Remember we talked about, back to front. Remember we talked about love being the way God communicates through emotion? And remember I said truth is the mathematical way God communicates through emotion actually too. So mathematics define your emotions. Interesting concept, but it's true. Truth is enforced and compelled by the law. So God's laws deal in facts. Just facts. That's it. That's why scientists love God's laws so much. Physical laws I'm talking about now. Most scientists have a deep love for physical law because it's all about facts. They can quantify it, they can measure it, they can use it over and over again without having to worry about anything else. It's like factual. And this is the beauty of truth. God's truth principle is it envelops fact around everything. But see, humankind think fact is limited to physical properties. And I'm suggesting to you that's not true. Fact is limited to spiritual properties, emotional properties, physical properties. Facts are even about facts about how love is transmitted. There are mathematical facts about how love flows. That's why many of you can't receive love, because you're not engaging the mathematical fact about how it flows. Right? We can talk about from an emotion, but we could also talk about it mathematically if you wanted to, but I don't know if you'd be very interested in it, because the problem is that most people are not interested in the mathematics of anything, let alone emotion. Right? But it is, truth enforces and compels through the law, is enforced and compelled. All creation lives within the framework of mathematical, scientific, spiritual and emotional fact. Interesting concept. True concept too. How everything that is alive, everything that exists, lives within a framework of fact. You know, and remember we said last night, this is how you use a mobile phone. If metals didn't live within a framework of fact, and if elements didn't live within a framework of fact, and creative processes didn't live within a framework of fact, in other words, repeatable, definable, permanent fact, then it would be impossible for anybody to have ever created a mobile phone. Just a simple device, and we nowadays believe it's not that simple device, right? But it's all based upon fact. All based upon fact. Without the fact of those laws existing and the properties of those individual materials existing, then the device could never have been created. So, very important to understand how important truth is to your life. Precision and certainty in the framework and fabric of creation. This is the beauty of it, it's repeatable. Truth ensures everything is repeatable, permanent. It allows you to do something with a device today and then come along tomorrow and have the same function for that device. If these principles didn't exist, you'd pick up a mobile phone today and it would dispense some coffee, and you pick up a mobile phone tomorrow and it would start talking to you, and you just pick up a mobile phone the next day and all of a sudden you've got a video. Oh, that can be done. But you pick up a mobile phone the next day and all of a sudden it's berating you by itself. And, all these different things would be happening, right? Because everything would be totally unpredictable. It would be just whatever the mobile phone decided would come up without any, if it could so decide, or whatever the principles governing these particular laws on the day happened to be. Now, fortunately, God never created God's universe like that, because everything would be so unpredictable that you'd be totally frightened every single moment of your existence, if you could exist for any length of time. Fact makes life possible. Fact also makes love possible. This is why truth and love have to be joined together. Without the two, life is not possible, and emotions of enjoyment, happiness, and those kind of emotions are also not possible. So very important to understand that. So let's have a look at that, how that looks in terms of some examples with gravity. Isn't it wonderful? I can measure it. Right, so here is the Earth. It's a mass. There is a law that determines that the larger the mass, the larger the gravitational pull on other masses. Right? And so that allows us then to eventually even get to the stage where we can calculate what the force is. And on the Earth, given its size and its mass, at the circumference, it's 9.78 metres per second squared. It's an accelerating force that's imposed by the mass upon everything that sits on that mass, or every other mass that is attracted to that mass. Even the sun has an interaction with the Earth's gravitation. The Earth's gravity field, of course. So here we go. Oh, by the way, at the pole, it's 9.83 metres per second squared. Interesting fact. Why do you think that might be? Because it's spinning. And it's spinning faster here than it is there, so there's more force pulling you off of the Earth at this point than there is here. So you go down to into the equator, and you might fly off. No, it's not like that at all, because we've got 9.78 metres per second still. So the average of that works out to be 9.8 metres per second squared, which is what they use to calculate gravitational pull on objects. So isn't it wonderful? You can describe it. It's permanent. They're given the size of the mass, the weight of that mass, what the mass is. It's permanent pull, which means that we can say, right, let's plan to go to the moon. The moon's this size, so given the fact that it has potentially this mass based upon the calculation of the sphere and what it might contain, then we would be able to calculate the potential of that gravitational pull from that. Can you see? So now I can create devices that don't have to worry about such a heavy pull on Earth that I can utilise to move around on the moon. That obviously they're going to have less stresses on their wheel systems and so forth, because there's less. You can pile them up with more rocks or whatever it is than you would be able to here, because there's less pressure on the tyres and so forth as a result of the lower gravity. So this enables me to travel even to other places in space and predict what the gravitational pull may be. So do you want to travel to Jupiter? It's a bad idea for the human body, because the gravitational pull is so strong that you'd be squashed into a little ball. Right? So it's not a good idea to visit Jupiter. You might visit one of its moons, but you certainly wouldn't want to go to the planet itself without there being some kind of way of counteracting this gravitational pull. So you can even predict what might be dangerous as a result, just because of the fact. Right? And that's how scientists predicted with a certain degree of fact of how to actually circumnavigate the globe with satellites and circumnavigate the globe with manned space station. Right? They wouldn't do it if it wasn't predictable, right? You imagine signing up for the job? You might die tomorrow, you might die in a week's time, you might never get there, but do you want to go? I don't think there'd be too many people going, yeah, take me. Except those who are probably wishing for suicide to be their actual result, right? So this is an example of, the law of truth being imposed upon, this principle of truth being imposed upon law. The same applies, of course, to aerodynamics, the potential of flight. The law defines the primary conditions for flight. So what are the primary conditions for flight? Do you know what they are? There's four things. Yeah? Do you want to yell them out if you think you know them?
Pressure.
Well, speed. What's speed really, though? It's like velocity, momentum. What would you classify it as? Do you want me to write them all down for you? Okay, let's do it. Okay. I'll just get my notes here. Yeah. So there's 4. Yeah, so they are the 4 things that are involved in flight. Something that creates lift, something that you need thrust to create lift of a certain thing. Drag is the pull of the air that you're going through. Air is like fluid, and therefore it has a pull upon the object you're trying to push through it. And then you've got the weight of the actual object, so that defines how much wingspan or how much what the wing curvature and so forth needs to be to create the necessary lift to fly. And then, of course, while you're flying, there's 3 controls. There's roll, there's pitch, and what's the third one? Yaw. So you've got roll is like the plane. If you're looking at the plane, roll is like that movement, right? Pitch is if you're looking at the plane where on the wing, this is going back and down and up, right? And yaw is when it's going like this, from side to side, and they're all able to be controlled by surfaces on the plane. And so now that gives us some predictability, given the aerodynamic properties of air at different latitudes, at different heights from the Earth, gives us some predictability of what we're going to be able to manage. And this is why some planes can only go a certain height, because they run out of lift at that height to actually go further and so forth. But they're all predictable requirements, right, for flight. Now, if we couldn't measure them and we couldn't predict them and they weren't constant, where would we be? Again, let's go for a mystery flight. You might come back, or you might fly out into outer space if there's no gravity, or you might hit the ground at a few thousand kilometres an hour, or would you like to pay me for that flight? I don't think so, right? If there was no predictability, of course you wouldn't. Your life would be threatened. Beauty of truth is it gives me this predictability in all law. It is the fundamental fact of the laws. Yep. It's fantastic that God's done that. These are just basic things we think about, but at the end of the day, it's remarkable, really, when you think about it, how much design there is in it. Let's look at the physical properties of substances and elements. So all matter has individual characteristics and properties, right? And each element of the same kind exhibits the same properties under the same circumstances. That's a great thing, This is a great thing. Imagine one day you build a house, and the next day you can walk straight through it. That's what it would be like if it was all unpredictable. Each substance had unpredictability. That's what would happen. everything would not be able to be predicted in terms of what you could do with it. All right? So this basic property of substances gives us things like when you put two atoms of hydrogen together with one atom of oxygen together, what do? You get an element H2O, and that you can actually drink. Right? But there are mathematical properties in the oxygen and the hydrogen that allow it to combine and form a mixed element. So two gases forming a fluid on the planet. Of course, that fluid can become a gas if it's heated. Right? But it has natural properties that even sustain our own life. Now imagine if that didn't exist. Our body is 70% water, and each day the two hydrogens decided, no, I'm not going to mix with the oxygen today. Where would your body be? You'd just fly apart, right? Your entire existence would not even be possible physically. Yeah? Natalie, you would like to ask?
You're just talking about predictability and how in some of the laws God's trying to generate an emotion inside of us. It feels like when you're saying about this predictability that God's trying to generate, well, for me, I'm gaining a feeling of trust in the laws.
Exactly.
And in God.
Exactly. Trust is an emotion, is it not?
Yeah.
Yep. And this is what God wants you to do, is to trust what he's done. And he's taught you trust by, in fact, there's so many things you trust in the course of a day, which are all dependent upon law, all dependent on variable factors that, if you really knew what was going on, most of us would just go, considering the level of fear most of us have, we'd be freaked to go out anywhere. But we'd also be too freaked to stay home because of all the, animals and creatures and particles and elements that are all governed by law there as well. So in the end, you'd be too frightened to do anything. So the reality is we have a level of fear, but most of the level of fear is, of course, based upon ignorance. Not based upon truth, because if it was based upon truth, we'd probably have none, right? Mm. And this is why truth is the antidote to fear.
And before I met you, I had no concept of gravity, took it completely for granted,
yeah.
Had no gratitude for it.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden I'm like marvelling at something that's been part of my life
It's
every
an
day.
amazing group. It's a group of laws, actually. A group of substances, a group of laws, all combining to create one, what we call the law of gravity, which is actually a great combination of millions of different elements that form gravity, but we call it the law of gravity, and it's just a remarkable thing. But it's a very basic thing too, isn't it? Very basic law that we've got some rudimentary, most of us have rudimentary understanding of. Yeah. Mm. Yep. Okay. So each substance has this, of the same kind, exhibits the same truth. Isn't it wonderful? Yep. Imagine picking up water today, having a nice drink, picking up water tomorrow, and it's poisonous. You keel over and you're dead. What a terrible thing. It would be so unpredictable. You'd be too afraid to do anything, wouldn't you? Like I just think about you be going around hypersensitive. What's going to do today? What's it going to do today? And this is how we feel with people a lot of times, but that's another subject. So the law of attraction, lovely law again, exposes me to the truth of my own condition by attracting circumstances and situations that expose the truth about my condition. So that's great. So I can measure my condition by what I attract, and I can actually respond to that and work my way through that and deal with that emotionally. Once I know my condition, I can see the causes of what I'm attracting. So a so-called accident happens, I can see what inside of me may have caused that, decision-wise or desire-wise or condition-wise. Wonderful law. Without truth, that law wouldn't exist. Couldn't exist, actually. Yeah. Well, pretty remarkable, isn't it? When you think about it? Yeah. Okay. We can go on for more and more. Physical illness in the human body. If I'm ill, the truth principle, law of compensation, law of cause and effect, law of attraction work together to tell me what I'm denying about love of self or love of others or love of my environment that's caused this particular problem or illness. So that means every single illness is predictable. Every single disease is predictable. We just don't believe it is. So, because we don't understand the laws involved, right? So, isn't it wonderful? The truth principles are really impossible for humans to understand again without receiving God's love, but they ensure consistency, existence, harmony and predictability in creation. Without them, nothing could exist, actually. So the beauty of God's principles is they sustain existence. So they're sort of the opposite of human law. Human law gets in your way, right? That's what most of us think anyway. But God's law is actually there to sustain your existence. Without it, there'll be no existence. So it ensures fearlessness, security and safety for all creation. We have the predictability, therefore we have the ability to go and make choice and decisions yesterday and today and tomorrow that are identical, expecting these same results. So that's all possible through truth principles. And unfortunately, again, they are the principles that we most frequently oppose, and to be frank with you, the majority of you are still opposing. The majority of you still do not tell the truth. You're not open and transparent about the truth. You are presenting a facade to the world. So in that regard, you're opposing the truth principle. And you're doing it because of fear. Fear is the reason why you're doing it. And yet it's one of the most essential principles to get. And to be frank with you, unless you learn to live your harmony and life in harmony with truth principle, it's highly unlikely you're going to understand at the soul level hardly anything else. That's how important it is. So that's something we need to change emotionally. Yeah.